All right, beautiful people. We are in another episode of the Silicon Valley to Spirituality podcast. And as promised, I am bringing on more spiritual guests. And I have a very special guest today, Reverend Jessica Sharp. Jessica, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's a joy to be here.
All right, Jessica. Well, I know that you have a very, very comprehensive background, but can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself, who you are, and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. I currently reside in Oakland, California, which is also Ohlone territory. And I am a psychic minister and sound healer and death doula. So how my background in meeting you is actually prior to coming into this work is I had a mindful cannabis events company. And I'm just excited to talk about all the possibilities of what bringing our full spiritual and comprehensive approach with life and death can unlock for humans and human potential.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, you said a lot of things that kind of piqued my curiosity just now. Sound healing. I've been really into the concept of using frequencies and vibrations to heal. You talked about being, I think, a psychic minister was one of them, and then the last was a death doula. So, can you tell us a little bit about each of those things that you do?
Yeah. So, let's see here. How do I start? I'll actually just rewind a little bit to give a little bit more context of my path and how I've ended up in these little spots. So I graduated from Boston University, studied journalism, and then I moved back to Utah, where I'm from, and I ended up getting a job. I was actually a nanny to this woman, and she hired me to be a consultant, and I started doing crisis planning for large companies, airlines, hospitals, and technology companies. Ended up at Salesforce doing crisis communications. Um, Went through a big life shift, realized technology is not where I wanted to be, went to Burning Man, and going to Burning Man just opened up so much for me, what I wanted to explore and what I wanted to do. And I think all of the psychic minister and the sound healing and death doula work definitely comes from having the experience of going to Burning Man and going to these types of spaces where that can really expand our understanding of how we can relate to each other in society and as groups and like what's possible amongst us. So I left the tech world, started a mindful events company, and when I was there, I was hosting sound healing events. I decided to go to sound healing school, the Globe Institute, which used to be in Soma, San Francisco, in California, and is now in Sausalito. I highly recommend folks checking it out if you're interested. And then when COVID hit and we couldn't have events anymore, I ended up going through Psychic Horizons program, which anyone can do anywhere around the world online, where they teach you how to use your intuitive clairvoyant abilities, which is in your sixth chakra or your third eye, how to unlock it, how to see, how to consciously get into an energetic state where you can see information really, really clearly. And then if you keep going through the school, they teach you how to use that to help yourself and other people heal and deal with, life's very difficult things. And so as I've been going through the school and as I've been in this meditation state, in this clairvoyant healing, during my apprenticeship, I ended up specializing in clairvoyant healings and psychic readings with people who had just transitioned. So within 5 days of the heart stopping. And those are really profound, deeply profound readings and experiences. And so I've just been working to support more of that in the world. Death is something that so many people are so scared of, and yet is actually a really natural part of life. We're all going to die, and is an opportunity, especially for folks like myself who, my mom is Korean, my dad is Utah American, Utah Mormon. Um, I've left a lot of the traditions of my parents and of the cultures, and so there's a lot of opportunity to explore spirituality as like what it means to me and my own personal and individual experience versus what like a society or group dictates is how I should relate to, death, how should I relate to life, how I should relate to things.
Oh, wow. From Salesforce to psychic ministry. So cool. So cool. You said so many things that really kind of like tantalized my mind. I think, let me just try to remember so I don't like step over my own words. Well, one of the things that you just said that really kind of like piqued my curiosity was, the show is called the Silicon Valley to Spirituality Show. So, in many ways, I feel like this is like the introduction to kind of like maybe people just had a spiritual awakening, a little bit kind of curious about exploring things beyond their five senses. And you had talked about, how to open up your third eye chakra to transmit and receive energies. I had talked to a few of my other guests, my previous guests, and, I was like, hey, can we talk about mediumship, channeling, astral projection? And they're like, no, 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 I'm not into that stuff, So super happy that, I have you on today. And so, for me, I think we were talking about like I was talking about sound healing and like how frequent like I look at the world now through frequencies and vibrations. And at least, for me, I've been practicing my own channeling through automatic writing and some verbal channeling, but I've never been trained by anyone, but my own just kind of intuition was to focus on my third eye, to open it up, be open to receiving as well as transmitting information. And then I just kind of, sit back and allow whatever's going to happen. And that's just kind of been like my own way. But I'm just curious, you were talking about like really training it. And so there was a part of me that was like, oh, maybe I should have, instead of just kind of learning on my own, like smoking weed or eating a few mushrooms and then just sitting there and experimenting, it might have been good to have some guidance. And, it sounds like you went through like a curriculum that really helped you develop these spiritual gifts. So can you just speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Psychic Horizons is a clairvoyant healing school started by Laura Hopper. She was a student and then teacher at Berkeley Psychic Institute and actually got kicked out of there and then went to San Francisco and started her own school in the early 80s. So what they teach you in a meditation state. So they teach you how to be in it's all through meditation. And they teach you how to place your energy in, and like the first step is to place your energy in and from your third eye, which is in the center of your head and as a gold ball. And then they teach you how to see from there. And like you do a grounding cord. They're teaching you how to see the energy body. And it's through a meditation state. And uh, you just have to practice it over and over and over and over again. And that's really what the school is doing. So they have step 1, step 2, step 3. And then by the end of step 3, you should be able to hold your attention enough to see your energy and adjust your energy to then make it easier to see and adjust your energy. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
um,
totally.
so it's a conscious effort done through meditation. And then what we see is that this Eastern understanding is that we have an energy body, we have a subtle body, an energy body, and the energy body has a anatomy just like a physical body. The anatomy of an energy body is a toroidal field where there's like
Mm,
lines, which are meridian lines, and then there are places where the meridians meet, which is chakras. And we have 7 primary chakras through the middle, and then we actually have many chakras more than that throughout. So when in the clairvoyant state, what we're doing is we're looking at the energy body. We're consciously getting into an energy state that makes it easy for us to see it. And then we're looking at it and we're engaging with it, asking questions. And through sight, and through questioning, we're able to dislodge some of the patterns and update karmic agreements. And then there are, spirits and energies that don't have physical form that support us. They teach how to consciously work with that because boundaries and consent are extremely important when dealing with energy, not just in people in physical bodies, but also energies that are not in physical body, which by the way, there are way more energies not in physical body than there are in physical body. So it's like really silly to me when people deny that they exist because it's like we've all had so many experiences where clearly there's things at play that are not in, physical bodies. Um, so they teach that through the sixth chakra, the clairvoyance, but they also, when you see the energy body, the anatomy of the energy body, there's also other intuitive, you can actually see where the homes of the intuitive abilities are. So in our second chakra, we have the ability for clairsentience, which is the ability to feel the feelings with others. And then in our fifth chakra, we have clairaudience, which is the ability to hear beings without bodies. And that's what I'm doing in my sound healing, actually, and I can see it clairvoyantly now, because I've trained myself and been able, and I've looked so much at different energy bodies, but um, it's called transmediumship. Usually one person in every family has extra antenna on their Vajra body, on their energy body, that allows for additional information to come through, which allows for higher intuitive sensibilities. Um,
Mm.
and so, yeah, so that's, and so the fifth is the clairaudience, and then the sixth is the clairvoyance. And all of those abilities can be consciously engaged with by any human, just like we can we can learn to run, we can learn all of our other senses, we can learn to hone. All of those senses can be learned to be honed in and used consciously as well.
Yeah, that's so cool, and I love that you talked about that you could hone and cultivate these. I know at least for myself, I grew up when I was open to people doing these things like channeling or mediumship, but I had always thought, "Oh, these were, like, really special people that were chosen for this," and as I got older, I realized, "Oh, wait, these are just, like, certain sense organs that you could absolutely cultivate if you knew the right exercises," and I loved how you used the analogy of, like, the antenna, because in one of my meditations, I had watched the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once, and I was really trying to understand, like, what do they mean by, like, everything everywhere all at once? And first I Googled it, and it's talked about like everything that has ever happened, everything that will ever happen is all happening simultaneously in the present moment across infinite parallel realities. And then my mind was like exploding, like everything, like how is this all happening? And when I meditated on it, the vision that I got was like, and the reason why the antenna comment like really resonated with me was the vision that I got was it showed like all the radio stations that I have access to in my area, and then how all these radio stations coexist on top of each other. But depending on what frequency that you're tuned into, that is the type of music that you will hear and listen to. And then those that practice cultivating their spiritual gifts are like expanding like the frequency range of like what they could tap into. So, maybe I'm saying, hey, 106.1 has the best music ever. And then you're like, well, my dial only goes up to 105. And then so the person saying 106.1 kind of looks a little bit crazy. And so, I'm kind of curious, like, we met in the cannabis industry. We talk about coming out of the green closet. Did you ever have to come out of the spiritual closet, or did you always feel comfortable, talking about spirituality?
Oh, it's every day. To, um, so my mother is very clairvoyant. My mother's Korean. She's very clairvoyant. And ever since I was a child, she was very open talking about her clairvoyant abilities and validating my clairvoyant abilities. And she also insisted that it was not safe for me to tell anyone else, like ever. And so going through psychic school, for most people, what they struggle with is being able to see, being able to hold their energy and see really clearly. For me, I saw really clearly. It comes really easily to me because I didn't have, I didn't close. It was validated for me as a child, so it's not like it didn't really close up. Like you kind of have to reopen it if it's closed. But what I had to work through, what I still have to work through, is tremendous fear about like saying these things out loud. And it makes a lot of sense in the context of my mother's life and my life and experience. In Korea, they still have a very alive shamanic lineage of female shamans who use their intuitive abilities. But since the 1400s, when the caste system was put in Korea, the shamanic class was made the same as the slave class. And still today, there are Korean female shamans who practice. Traditional is kind of a weird word because the way that it comes through is directly from spirit. Although there are like traditional lineage, rituals and stuff. but in public, amongst society, they are shamed, they are pariahs. But why they still exist is because families still, when they have a marriage or a birth or a new business or it's this harvest season, they still go to the shaman, like go to her back door and knock on her window and have a little ceremony with her. So as a woman, actually also claiming spiritual authority is heavy for me. It is actually a big deal for me because I was also raised Mormon. The Mormon Church explicitly says that it's the job of men to talk to God, and it's the job of women to have babies. And I'm a woman who talks to God all day, who has no babies. So there is very much for me, a rebellion that I've had to bring to claim my spirituality, for myself and with others. But it is something that's been really rewarding for me. And I have also found, there's just wisdom and cultivating in myself, my own understanding, my own sense of calmness, my own sense of confidence, my own sense of validation, not requiring that validation from folks outside myself, or if they think I'm crazy. Like you were saying, it's just that suddenly you get this awareness like, oh, they can't reach channel 106. They're just not going to see it. So then at a certain point too, you're like, well, I'm just going to enjoy being in 106 and let them be over there and whatever they're in, and like you work yourself to getting to that point. And then being available when people are ready to come to you and like, oh, there's maybe something that you see or understand that that is of interest. And I think I think a lot of people are waking up to that. I mean, it's insane that people don't talk about spirits. Like I said, there's more spirits than there are like not in body than there are in physical body. And more traditions have ritual of talking to and communicating with ancestors. That there are more cultures that practice that than there are less cultures that practice that. And just because our global north predominant culture is one that actually really oppresses conversations with spirit, with ancestors, that for many of us like myself have the Korean background. Like I also understand that it's like just that there's it's actually part of our human hardwiring. It's actually part of our it's like ritual. It's actually part of how we feel connected to ourselves and each other is through also our understanding of the unseen world.
Mm, man, thank you. Well, number one, I just wanted to thank you for trusting me enough to come on the show and talk about these things. I definitely was much more comfortable coming out of the green closet than I was of the spiritual closet. I can't tell you how much flack I've gotten for talking about these things from people. And that radio station analogy, it was presented to me to help me better understand like why certain people couldn't resonate with what I was saying, because I was like, well, even if they don't resonate with it, at least I'm not being like forceful about it. I'm not saying like this is the way. I'm being quite open about it. But yeah, like if someone's telling you like, hey, the best information is at 107.7 and your radio only goes up to 106, like you're gonna think the other person is just in their own world. And in many ways, I do believe, I mean, a lot of what you talked about the energetic world, that really resonated with me. And I'm like super just like, I feel like super like empowered right now speaking with you because, I've had these deep meditations where some of the visions that I see, and I don't know if this is, um, wait, what is the Claire called when you actually see stuff?
Clairvoyance.
Clairvoyance. Yeah, I don't know if it's clairvoyance or not, like, when people ask me, like, when you see something, it's like it's not even like I really see it in my mind's eye. I just kinda, like, just I have, like, some visual, but then I just have, like, this knowing, and the knowing was that this physical world is actually, like, the dream world that our spirits, it was kinda shown to me, like, our spirit is having like, it's projecting itself into this physical dream, and part of this projection of this physical dream is like giving ourselves amnesia. And the reason why we give ourselves amnesia is to rediscover that we are all one and not the separate entity that we all believe that we are. And I remember like telling my friends this, and they're just like, Seibo, you've just taken one too many dabs, or you've eaten way too many
Yeah.
mushrooms. And, in my mind, I'm like, like sharing like these like really deep, intimate like epiphanies that I had. And then just to be told like, yeah, so I totally understand why your mom told you like to keep this to yourself. But I have found that as I've gained courage to speak more about this, just like, coming out of the green closet when I started speaking vocally about using cannabis, it was like everyone else was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, okay, we could talk to Sabo about our cannabis use." So I hope that having a podcast like this, having people like yourself that were at Salesforce now being a death doula, like it allows people to connect with people that are spiritually inclined. Because I know for myself, when I saw like someone like Sadhguru or these Tibetan monks that are meditating in these caves, I just thought like it's really awesome that they're where they're at, but like I just couldn't relate with them. I didn't feel like I would ever be able to get on that level. So I really appreciate you coming on here, displaying the courage to talk about all these things, and hopefully, it will allow a whole new generation of indigo children or star seeds to be much more empowered to talk about their spiritual gifts and how they want to serve people with them.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that. It is so important that we put ourselves out there, and that when you are like really connected and you know the truth, and like the truth with like a capital T, and it is like, it's like speaking it, it's like sometimes people will like, whoa, but there's something that gets through because that like, that like it when something's like really true, capital T, it just like it does. It gets through at some point. Um, but for me, like in my psychic readings, I talk about past lives because our karma is real. Karma is real, and our karma comes from not just our karma comes from two places. It comes from our ancestors and it comes from our astral body, because we're both a physical body and we're also an astral body, an energy body. And so our patterns, what we live out, what our life experiences are, is a combination of both. And past lives, the lives of your ancestors and your own past lives as a soul and as a spirit, like play heavily into the current life experience. And it's funny because some of the people that I work with, like, they talk about we have these readings where I talk about their past lives, and like there's no way I could know this. Like I tell people this stuff and it's like the level of detail I can share is like so deep. And then people, when they're like, you're like, I don't know, I can't like logically understand how you would know that, but like what you're sharing with me is so clearly so tied to what exactly I'm going through, and there's no way you could have known that, like that level of detail. And so you're just like, oh, there's like something true here, there's something real here. And what's funny is a lot of the people that I work with, like their kids are now like picking up on it, and their kids are like meeting, new family friends. They're like, oh, do you know about your past lives? What was like happening in your past lives? And I think that that's really awesome because, reincarnation is, Buddhism understands it, Vedic traditions understand it, Eastern traditions understand it. But because this like oppressive white supremacy Christianity, like, has put this weird box around it, we don't talk about it here in our common culture and our shared culture. And that's it's such a disservice when we reinforce that our life, our lived experience is shaped by so many things, including and especially like our soul's experience, and that goes past this body. And that's not to like make this body less than or in any shape or form, because there's a reason why we chose to be in a body and to be in this experience, and it pays to be present and embodied in it. But it is to say that we're clearly so much more. And it's easy to understand that actually so part of my death doula work is working with the Tibetan Book of the Dead with the understandings. And this is actually a mistranslation. The Book of the Dead is actually a mistranslation. Guru Rinpoche wrote this Padmasambhava in the 8th century, and it's actually Managing the Six States of Consciousness was the title of the book, and is like the work. So we have the living state, Then we have the sleeping state in our dreams, right? In our dreams, we don't have our bodies, but we're clearly us. There's clearly me. There's clearly a me that's conscious. And then there's the meditation state, time of dying, luminosity, and then rebirth. So like that's what incarnation is. It's like taking going through these phases. And when I explain to people, like, yeah, like I help you navigate the states of consciousness. It's like, just like, yes, you are a body in this experience, but when you're asleep, you don't have your body, but you're still you, right? There's still something. And just like when you're in meditation and you're not connected to your body, but you're like out, there's clearly a you there that has an expansive ability to tap into things that are not necessarily about the physicality of the world.
Mm, that's so cool. You use the term subtle body and astral body earlier. Does subtle body refer to physical body and astral body your energetic body?
Yeah. So, like these, you can go ask a different teacher, a different person. They'll give you a different definition, I'm sure. But the working definitions that I use based on my teacher, my lineage of psychic horizons in the Church of Natural Grace, is that astral body refers to the soul, and then the subtle body is your energy body, which is the shape, the anatomy shape that the astral body comes into, that interacts and creates the imprint for the physical body.
Whoa,
So
got
the
it.
astral body is your toroidal energy field. I'm sorry, no,
Mhm.
your subtle body is your astral toroidal field. Your astral body is your soul that's like coming into that. And then that astral subtle body, energy body, manifests through to become your physical body and your experience.
Got it, through the toroidal field.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, and then I just did some Googling earlier, this week about, like, the importance of the shape of the torus, and then I came across the toroidal field, so, I'm glad that I had, like, some reference point to what you just said. You talked about, like, karma and past lives. I think just like when I talked about spiritual or the subtle body and the energetic bodies, and you said there might be different definitions. Like, when people talk about karma and past lives, like most people that I speak to, as well as myself, I used to think about karma as you do something bad comes back to you, or vice versa. You do something good comes back to you. But I was curious, like when you talked about karma in previous lives, is it in like a different definition than what I just described?
I think that like fundamentally it's the same, but it's actually like bigger and wider. And also in the context of like, what's the point? Like, why are we here? What's the point? So, like, something that do you know the game like Trivial Pursuit?
Hmm.
And like you start with like a pie and you like go around to the different categories. And then when you like win a category, you get to put a like pie. And then when you have a full pie, you like win. It's like that's like kind of how I think of like the astral and body incarnating over many lifetimes. So it's like the idea that we're here to learn. We're here to learn through experiencing and grow through experiential experiences. And we can't really understand an experience until we've had both sides of unless we've experienced both sides of the coin. So when I read people their past lives, I'm often describing something that they've already experienced in a slightly different way, and or the opposite of what they've experienced in a slightly different way that they're going through again. And I kind of like think of it as like the Trivial Pursuit, like, oh, they're about to win their like wedge for like this like element of like life experientials, like lessons, like, this idea that like earth is like a a place for us to learn and grow. And so, yeah, I like, honestly, like, this is really heavy. I'll just, this, I just had a recent reading where we were reading with this woman. She had some issues, and we were looking at past life, and we had past lives where she was both like the victim of sexual assault, and then we saw other past life where she was also the perpetrator of sexual assault. So like this is something that is like common, like, you know, that we'll see, but like, and in seeing that, in having compassion for that, she's able to release that pattern, recognize and feel this sense of completion. And then then that type of pattern has zero impact on her life anymore, which means that, you know, she doesn't, she can just respond to it either how she chooses without it being like an overly emotional reaction, like based on the past.
Wow.
So
Wow.
yeah, that's like common. That's like that's there's often some sort of lesson that we have to experience or understand on like the seat of the table we're in, and then like the healing is being able to expand and like have compassion for all the other seats at the table before we can like, you know, to be healed means that this thing no longer impacts me. Like this, I'm free
Yeah.
from it. I am free from I am free from having to react or respond to it in a certain way, actually. And oftentimes it takes that wider perspective, that wider lens. But when you, yeah, when looking at souls, and the other thing is like soul groups, this is also like kind of a commonly understood thing with people who work with the soul, is that like we often incarnate with the same people. So like oftentimes when I do readings with people in relationships, we look at past lives where they were, you know, maybe if you were looking at a relationship with your mom, or looking at a past life where you were siblings, or where you were the mom and they were the son, you know, like, so we'll look at that, and like it'll start to pull apart this deeper understanding of these relationships and the dynamics and the way that we have sat at different spots in the table of that dynamic and how it impacts and shapes us in our experiences.
Yeah, you know, that's really interesting, and I think what you said, um, I think that it does help me kind of reconcile what is going on politically. And the last guest that I had interviewed, I shared a story. I'm gonna just share it again. Was that um, I tend to over the last 3 years, I moved out of San Francisco. I live in a rural area. In many ways, like I'm very secluded from just whatever is going on, and I really focused most of my time on spiritual expansion and just meditating and just discovering whatever is out there. And I tend to be highly skeptical. So I just kind of been like learning in my own vacuum, because I felt like if I started learning from spiritual teachers and they would tell me like you'll see this the spiritual eye, or this is gonna happen, or you'll have a kundalini release, then those would be things that I would be looking for. And then when they happened, I think I would like kind of question myself, like, would this have happened if, I wasn't, told these things before? And so I just kind of give that background because, I have not been connected to like the news or anything. But since this year is a presidential election, I was like, you know what? Probably a good time for me to just kind of get up to speed on what's going on in the world. And well, it opened up Pandora's box. My nervous system got all messed up as I'm reading this. And, I am a Democrat, but I like to think I'm very open minded. And, you know, I watching Biden do his speeches or not do his speeches, however you want to classify his performances, did not give me a lot of faith in him. I do not have a lot of faith in Trump. And so I sat down and I started meditating, and I just asked, my higher self. Typically, what I do is just, what do I need to do? What do I need to know today is the question I usually ask, and just wait. And when I was meditating on this, um, and I'm connecting this to the story that you just talked about um, that person being the victim and the perpetrator. It was like, Seibo, you have been Biden and you have been Trump. You are these people as well. And it was like really hard for me to like go like, like I know I received it, and most of the stuff that I receive, I'm like, yeah, yeah, this is good. This is good. Like I could carry this into the day. But this time I was like, I'm Biden and I'm Trump. It was hard for me to kind of like reconcile what I just received. But I think you sharing that story about being both the perpetrator and the victim, and then kind of neutralizing the situation so that that person didn't have to carry that so much. I think that's kind of like the takeaway that I'm getting from, my own personal experience.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. So I had yeah, like I'm a woman. I've been championing for women's rights. I do a tremendous amount with women's empowerment and was a vocal voice when Me Too was happening, and have done a lot of restructurings with men who've, done horrible things with power. And I went on a pilgrimage to the Himalayas 2 years ago. No, yeah, last a year and a half ago. And while I was in Nepal, I was having all these flashbacks to a past life where I was a man who committed tremendous harm to a lot of people. Actually, I was like a very powerful general who really did commanded large groups of men to commit horrible, horrible acts to people. And it was crazy. I was like walking around the city and I'd get these like intense flashbacks. And at night, in my dreams, I would like feel what it felt like to be in his body again. And, yeah, I've had to like reconcile that, you know what I mean? Like I had to like, and that's part of it. But the healing is now for me is like, when you're sitting at the table and when you have both the victim and the perpetrator, it's like my capacity for compassion has to be big for, that's it. It's like my compassion has to hold all of this. Like, because I have, when I truly deeply go inside into what my soul's experience is, and also an understanding that I am interconnected, I am not actually separate, then I have to recognize that's yeah, it's like I have to hold that some part of me has been a part of all of that. And um and then that's releasing, because then when I'm no longer in the judgment, no longer in the stories, no longer in the fear, I can start to see people and humans as they actually are, rather than the stories and the hurt emotions of who they are. And I think that's the power of that type of work. And also, when you look at, I think it's easier for me to help people through death because I look at people's past lives. I look at so many past lives all the time, and it's like when you're looking at past lives all the time and you're connected with, you understand it, it makes death not so scary, because then you're like, well, I'm just going to go through the door and come back the door on the other side, and then there's going to be something interesting and fun on that side.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And speaking about past lives, so I'm curious. I've heard other people utilize the term alternate life because they say like the past and the future, like it's all like happening. Everything is happening simultaneously at the present moment. So if someone's making a past life connection, are they connecting to an alternate version of themselves that might be living in the like what we would say is like back in the 1800s, but during like that alternate version of them is experiencing the 1800s right now? Or I guess, I understand kind of like what they talk about from this, like everything happening all at once, but at least this version of me has only experienced time linearly. So it's like, yeah, I get the concept, but it's like really hard for me to think like all of these things are happening at the same time. So, having someone like yourself that does do these past life readings, I'd just be curious, what your thoughts are on that are.
Yeah. So when we do readings, we do this thing called a rose reading, which is actually a methodology passed down of the Rosicrucian lineage. If anyone, this is like deep, like mystery school. Rosicrucians are actually, it's part of my European English side. Um, but we look at the energy in the form of a rose, and then it informs us about your growth period. So, where are you getting your highest information? How's communication working? What are the themes of this growth period? And what are the past lives that you're pulling information from, in order to inform you in this experience? So we are grounding it in the what I'm forgetting the world, but like, we're in a karmic cycle. We are experiencing time in a linear way, and there is an unrolling and an unraveling that is happening, a wheel spinning that is happening in that. You have to exit the wheel spinning, being the wheel inside the ball spinning, and seeing just the globe itself, to be in the realm of seeing everything all at once with the future and the past, because that's like dimensionally different than the dimensional experience that we're having now. And it's like the way I kind of think of it is like a painting. Like, actually, this was the vision that I got when I asked to understand this, was like a painting. Imagine a big painting, and the painting already sort of exists, but we're only looking at it like one JPEG, one pixel at a time.
Mm.
And so you kind of have to go through, we can only see it one pixel at a time, but it's all sort of like there. It all already sort of exists. So when I look at past lives, it is really tied to still space-time continuum, because I'm looking, and it's all tied to Earth incarnations, although I do see incarnations on different planets. And then there's the idea that, we're kind of like the ocean takes a cup. You take a cup of water, and that's like you're the cup. Your body is like the cup of water. And then it changes shapes, and it grows, and it goes back into the water, sort of like the same. But there is like a very real process of growth, learning, experiences, embodiment that is happening over time space, not just in one body, but in many bodies. And that is in agreement. So that's the other thing, is when I'm doing psychic readings and I'm actually looking at agreements. Fundamentally, I'm helping renegotiate agreements between you and other people that exist on that higher dimension of connectivity. Um, so I don't know if
Yeah.
that helped answer your question of, yeah, how I think of it and how I understand it.
No, it does, and when you talk about agreements, I'm assuming, like, people in your soul pod or soul family, you guys have certain agreements about what types of themes you wanna explore in this life, and, I've recently, come upon this other term of the oversoul, and are you familiar with oversouls? And if so, like, how do, like, the soul family and is there overlap with the soul family with the oversoul? Or, how do these, I guess, souls kind of interact with all of each other?
I haven't heard of the oversoul terminology yet. Is that have to do with a group, like a group of souls?
Yeah, I mean, when I learned about it, it definitely seemed very similar to like the soul family or the soul pod, which is what I'm familiar with. And so the way that they described the oversoul was that the oversoul the meta oversoul would be source energy or all that is, but an oversoul would be like, the way that it was explained was if you look at your five fingers, they're all individuated fingers and they all have their own individual experience, but they're all part of the hand. So the hand would be like the oversoul and the fingers would be like the individual souls. So like I would be like the pinky, you would be like the index finger, and some other people would be um, the other fingers. And then all of these fingers have their own independent experiences, but it all feeds up into the oversoul. So, and as a person was explaining this concept, what really kind of made my ears perk up was that they said that many times the person that gives you the most amount of like grief or stress, anxiety, or conflict in your life, you guys are from the same oversoul. And this was an agreement to really push you as a catalyst to expand your consciousness. And when I thought about that, I was like, wow, at least in my lifetime, when I think about like my arch nemesises, like they did put me through a lot of like mental suffering, spiritual suffering, but I also learned so much by either having to draw boundaries or expectations or practice more like self-love for myself and things of that nature. And so yeah, in many ways I do feel like maybe soul pod and oversoul are just different ways to talk about the same concept. But as I said, you're like one of my first guests that is like just kind of like jumped in talking about like mediumship and psychic ability. So I was like, oh, perfect. Like here's my chance to maybe get this concept clarified.
Yeah, well, so what I see is we do have a soul that's like tied to our body and life experience, and then there are lots of group agreements, exactly what you just said, like where especially the people, and like oftentimes you meet someone, you're like, oh, we're gonna like something's gonna go down between us, like we're gonna be friends, or like people can often feel it because yes, you came into your life, you have a life plan when you are born. You determine when you're born, and also it's predetermined when you're going to die, which is also can change. It can change. It can be renegotiated. The soul. It can be negotiated, especially in the sleep. Sometimes people are conscious of that when you're in sleep state, and it also free will has happened. People like suicide is also real. People can shoot, end the life not at the agreed upon or not at the pre-planned time, because oftentimes those people are so disconnected from their soul that actually it's actually a huge pain of disconnection from understanding soul connection, which is actually drives people to that choice. But what I do actually, something that like I like this idea of oversoul. I haven't had the nomenclature for it, but there's a soul pods, but then there's also like something that I've been tapping into recently is like humans, the soul of human. Like I in an ayahuasca ceremony, I saw myself as a leg hair, and like everybody other people around me were like the other leg hairs on the like human, and so that's like an imagery I go to often, and like because like some days too, like I won't know what's going on in the news, but I'll suddenly feel so much emotion. I'll feel so much going on in my body, and then I'll see the news that something big is coming out in the news, and it just makes all the sense in the world. That if it was almost like if I had known that news, I would had known. I'm like emotionally reacting to it, and when I meditate and I'm like, what's going on? It's like, oh no, I am not separate from human. There's a collect like we are. I am just a leg hair. Of course, I'm feeling the feeling of human, and so I guess in
Mm.
the terms of like oversoul, like there is a human oversoul, right? Like, and we are all feel like we are just the leg hairs on the human,
Oh
the
man,
human soul.
I love that visual that you
Yeah.
you just painted for all of us. I think this might be a good segue because we were going to talk about near death experiences, and then you talked about like these exit plan opportunities, and like these exit plans can be shifted. So there's like a near death experience, like someone was supposed to leave, and then during the time that they're about to leave, they're like, "Hey, maybe we had an agreement to leave at this time, but I want to stay longer."
Yes. Yes. And these are not conscious negotiations unless someone has been trained very deeply in meditation state to be able to access this type of conscious communication. Typically. So I had a near death experience actually when I was in my 20s. I almost slid off the side of a cliff. And as my car was careening, I went down this hill in Park City. I was going down this hill. It was icy. I hit an ice patch. I swirled, turned upside down, slid like literally within 2 feet of going off a cliff because there was like this break in the brackets because of like an exit, and my car went right through the middle of like the brackets, like almost right off the cliff. And I was not conscious, but I screamed, "I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. I'm not dying. I'm not ready yet." It was not a conscious choice, but I screamed, "I'm not ready yet." And my car stopped right before going off the side of the cliff. And I, drove to my business meeting, had my business meetings all day. And then actually at 5 o'clock, I got in my car and I just started crying. And that's like when I allowed myself to feel how insanely scary that was. Um, I have also met people, and actually, this is a common thing for me, which because I work with death and people in the death portal, death process, I've had many people who've come to me who have died, and different souls have come into their bodies, and they are now living out a
Wow.
different incarnation, or multiple souls. Like they literally died, were deemed dead, and came back to life, and everyone's like, "Oh, they're alive," and they like come to me and they're like, "But I'm not the same person." And I'm like, I see it. I'm like, yes, I see that you're not the same person.
Yeah, wow,
So that
wow.
also happens, which is really crazy.
So is this like what happens when like people are in like a accident, they have traumatic head injuries, and then they could like speak another language or play a musical instrument like all of a sudden? Is that like someone is like stepping in and like taking over the operation of this meat vehicle?
It could be. It could be. I've also seen people who have attached like twins. Like, how we have like Siamese twins and how they have like like I've seen like people with extra like a Siamese like a spirit Siamese twin, and he had this like weird experience. Yeah, he was having these like really crazy kind of, it seemed like schizophrenic experiences, but like when I look at his energy body, it's like he has a like a twin spirit that's still attached to him. So this, it can be, there can be lots of things. There's also like things like guides. There's actually a tremendous amount of like energy leeches on a lot of people. A lot of human bodies have lots of what we in our school call guides, because we want to treat it as like a neutral term. We don't want people to be afraid that they have these other types of spirits that are attached to them necessarily, because these spirits can cause harm through the fear that it instills in people. But yeah, it is very common for lots of people to have lots of beings without bodies around them attached to them.
Okay, interesting. What you just described, like it I had previously thought, okay, maybe if they suffer a traumatic head injury, then, their brain is like just tuned to another frequency. So instead of like channeling, Seibo, all of a sudden I'm channeling someone else, but this concept of other spirits being able to enter, um, wow, wow, it's just making me like just I'm having like all these different thoughts about, there have definitely been times in my life where um I felt like just different, different. And I guess I'm just trying to discern, like, was I just feeling off that day, or, did I allow some other entity to just temporarily take over, control over this body?
It's very common, and it's actually really common around alcohol. When people are very
Wow.
inebriated, they're oftentimes it's other entities that are using their body for their own reasons.
Wow. What about other, like, consciousness shifting, molecules, like ayahuasca or psilocybin? I definitely have felt, um, this shift in my consciousness during that time. Like, would alcohol be like allowing maybe like more mischievous or entities that do not have your highest good in mind, whereas plant medicines like mushrooms or ayahuasca allowing in like more benevolent entities?
Yeah, so I would say that, so like the substance itself is not what carries the power. It's actual the ritual and consciousness of the keepers and the intentions of the usage and the containers in which they're held that are the power. And whether, so like
Mm.
when you sit with ayahuasca, and when I sit with mushrooms, I have many spirit guides. The When it's a natural substance, it's a substance that grows in nature. It has its own spirit. Ayahuasca has her own spirit. Mushrooms, psilocybin have their own spirits. The individual species have their own spirits, and these are spirits we can communicate with. And these are spirits that show up to support us and to help us when we're ingesting them, when we're in relationship with it by ingesting it, right? Um, and there are many humans and other spirits who have had the intention of healing, have had the intention of connection, have had the intention of insight, have had the intention of all these things. And that has gone into the relationship with the substance and has gone into the container of the substance. It has gone into the ritual, has infused the energy of it. And that's what makes a healing. When we think of like alcohol can be used in a healing way. But most alcohol, when we're talking about people going to bars and, they're drinking alcohol, and it's like, the people that are making the alcohol, the purpose of the alcohol is about inebriation. It's about lack of boundaries. It's about being able to unload, unleash, have no boundaries, have, be part, like, so it's like, it's a very, there isn't like ritual, there isn't consciousness, this isn't a prayer, there isn't, these things. So then that attracts the types of, then it's a magnet to the types of energies that want to take advantage of that type of scenario. And we see this, we see this also at like festivals and other places where when you do something with the intention of healing, when you do something with the intention of togetherness and well-being for self and well-being for others, you have just a very different experience than when you don't have those intentions. And also, if
Wow.
you're acting out of fear, if you're acting out of a place of disconnection, that's being like further, that's being, your disconnection is being validated rather than connection being validated. It's like that's the experience that's going to be magnetized and amplified by these substances.
Wow. You know, what you just said just really validates a lot of what I have been experiencing with like craft cannabis versus, you know, huge mega farms growing, super fire looking herb. But when I consume it, I just don't. I thought maybe like I just had like this bias towards, my friends who are craft farmers that are, in my opinion, growing it with the right intention and wanting to support them. But now, after your explanation is like, no, it's yeah, it's the THC molecule, yes, but what was the intention in growing it? And I know my friends that grow it are absolutely about like healing, and obviously they want to make a living off of it, but profit isn't their main driver. So to me, that like gives a really great explanation. And I've never been a fruits and vegetables person. I always tell my kids to eat fruits and vegetables, and they'll be like, "Well, Dad, like you only eat like a couple pieces." And when we moved out to this rural area, my wife and I, we've been growing our own. I would say probably 70 to 80% of all the fruits and vegetables that we eat. And I would always tell her, like, I think we're like the best growers. Like this food just tastes better. It's like more vibrant. And now I'm really starting to put two and two together. It's like when my wife and I are out there, sometimes we're with our kids, we're just really enjoying each other's company. I'm talking to the plants. I see like bees come in and take some pollen and take it somewhere else. I'm having a relationship with the bees. And, for me, just being like a city kid, I just thought, oh, I'm just enjoying nature, but now I'm really seeing, no, it's like this energy that my family is bringing into the food that we're growing, so that when we take in the food, it's like reciprocating that energy back to us.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah. Now, whatever it is that you grow, yeah, go to like a Safeway or go to a cheapo grocery store where it's like empty calories and they use lots of chemicals, and your body will be like, "Don't eat this. Don't, this is poisonous." And you're like, a carrot should be a carrot. But when you really tune in, also when you tune in with the body will really tell you. Actually, there's some famous spaces that are like spiritual places on earth that the way that they've proven how they're truly spiritual spaces is they've been able to grow huge nutritious vegetables, and it's through communicating with the plants and the vegetables and asking them what it is that they need and they want and responding to that. And it's like, here's the proof, it's like, and then you eat it and it's like it's undeniable. And people have to be in like you were saying, a receptivity to even be able to understand, to be able to under experience, to be able to connect with this. Like there's a nuance to it, and there's an emerging nuance to it the more you engage with it.
That's so awesome. That's so awesome. All right. Well, I know we were supposed to talk more about NDEs, but we are getting at to the top of the hour. But I would love for you to come on again. And one of the last questions I ask all my guests, it's an open-ended question. Jessica, what is most important for you to communicate to the world today?
Oh, um, I would say forgiveness. Forgiveness. Um, there's a reckoning happening. There's a reckoning that we as a collective have the opportunity to face, as humans who've inherited a world that's not working for most of us. And the way to move has got to be through. And forgiveness is kind of like a lube for life. I'm not gonna lie. um, and it doesn't have, actually, the most powerful thing we can do is a self forgiveness practice. So just like people, we've learned, oh, gratitude, if you want to understand gratitude, you got to practice it every day, multiple times a day, make a gratitude journal. You have to like engage with it consciously, intentionally, and multiple times, like hopefully daily, multiple times at a time. Like it's not something that's just going to occur. Like, but if you make the effort to do the exercises and to engage with it, it brings so much fruit into life. And I would say forgiveness is this huge thing that because of our throwing out of religion that hasn't served us for good reason, um, forgiveness is self-forgiveness practice. So like I actually have a mala and I ask myself for forgiveness and grant myself for forgiveness 108 times, a couple times a month. And when I'm not feeling good, that's what I do. And I think that that's one thing with death work and healing work. The biggest thing that we can do is practice forgiveness. And good forgiveness doesn't mean like good forgiveness also includes discernment. When we truly forgive, we also stop ourselves from continuing the pattern that caused us have to forgive in the first place. So I would say
Mm.
that's my biggest thing that I think doesn't get talked about enough, doesn't get practiced enough, but can really unlock so much for people in their life.
Yeah. That's so cool. When you said forgiveness, I thought about forgiving, the people that have wronged me in my life. But as I heard you speak more, it was also to really forgive yourself. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, yeah. That forgiving other people will come if you start with yourself. Like actually it's a self-forgiveness practice. I ask myself for the pain I've caused myself. I ask myself for forgiveness for the difficult things I've gone through and then I seek to grant myself forgiveness for the difficult things I've gone through. And that's what actually releases me from it.
Hmm. That resonates. That resonates. So, for people that want to work with you, what is the best way for them to find you and contact you?
Yeah. So I do have a website for my death doula work, joyfuldeath.institute. And then I also have a website for myself, Rev Jessica, www.revjessicasharp.com. And then I'm also on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook, so people can find me there. If you just search my name, Rev Jessica Sharp, it's easy to find me.
Hmm. Well, this has been such a illuminating, expansive conversation. Thank you so much for coming on. I am feeling very full in my heart right now, and I will remember what you talked about forgiveness. I have been It's been an ongoing thing that I've been working on, and many times I will just use like how my life looks out on the outside as a measurement of like how well I'm doing, but what I've come to realize is everything could be perfect on the outside, but there's still this kind of feeling of discomfort within my body. And as you said, forgiveness, it did become clear to me that there are different things that I'm still blaming myself for. As a child, as a teenager, as a young father, as an entrepreneur that I haven't let go. So I'm very appreciative of those last words. And for everyone listening, I'll put all the links in the show notes so you'll have access to our website, her social media channels, and Reverend Jessica Sharp. Thank you so much for being on our show. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me, Seibo. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
All all right. Let me end the recording here.